I want to walk you through some easy DIY at-home products you may already have and how easy it is to transform with chalk paint, some wax, and I'm going to demonstrate some new pearlescent glaze. Starting with this chandelier, I am going to use the pearlescent glaze and some of Annie Sloan's chalk paints. Starting with this chandelier, I actually would like to change these light fixtures, and I'm going to show you what I'll do as we continue. I'm going to start my base off with Chicago Gray, and starting with a moist paintbrush and a little bit of water from my spray water bottle, I just really want to get a good first coat on here as well as I can. And I'm actually going to use a few different little brushes here. As you can see, there's a lot of tiny little crevices and details to get into. Working on a particular project like this, I found it a lot easier to flip it upside down and then flip it back as I was applying the paint. I also found using a very tiny little chippy brush very helpful for the small little tiny details. So I want to show you guys my next project as we let this dry. And I am actually going to be using air dry molding clay here, and what I'd like to do is make a mold, and I'm going to show you why. So with this mold, it's pretty easy. It's just like Play-Doh. So just flatten it out, grab your mold, and you just want to flatten it out. I would even recommend maybe using a rolling pin if you want to flatten it out super flat, but I'm just going on a whim here. So there you go, pretty easy. And I just want to finish off this first coat here with the Chicago Gray. Once completed, we'll let that dry and then we'll move on to our next step. So using Annie Sloan's French linen, I'm just going to go ahead and apply a second coat on top of our Chicago Gray. And I'm not looking for full coverage. I really just want to get a random coat on here. I'm going to use a lot of water and I'm just going to stipple it on there, just getting it into random areas. And you're going to see why as we continue. Again, super helpful to flip the chandelier upside down, making sure you're getting all the corners and crevices. Again, just applying this in random, and then we can move on to our next step. Now what I'd like to do is actually add old white, and I'm going to do it just in a wash form. So 1 part paint, 1 part water. And I'm literally just going to slap that on there and let it run all over. And I'm going to use those shop towels just to dab here and there. And I just want to create some highlights using this old white on the chandelier. And again, as we get into the next steps, you'll see why. I didn't get too picky about all the little details. I literally just wiped where I could and flipped it upside down and did another wash from the other side. So pretty easy. Once this step was completed, again, you want to let each paint application dry fully, and then we can move on to our next step. So here's an aerial of how it looks so far, and I like it even just the way it is. But I have a couple of more steps I want to try with this chandelier to get the effect of what I'm looking for. Using Annie Sloan's new Pearlescent Glaze and just a small little artist brush, I'm actually going to experiment here, and I'm actually going to just apply the glaze everywhere I can. and I'm going to put it all over the chandelier, and then we're going to let that dry. So I am almost done putting the glaze over the entire piece, and then we can take a close-up of what it looks like. And as you can see, it almost looks like tin foil. It's really shimmery, but it's also still moist. So it is recommended to leave it for 2 to 3 hours to let dry, and then we'll move to our next step. Let's move over to the glass flower pot, and what I'm doing here is using the old white chalk paint. But what I did is I had just a little tiny bit left in this can, and I actually let it air dry out a little bit so it got really thick, and that's what I wanted. I want super thick, almost like a batter, and I'm just literally just plopping it on there. No specific brush stroke. If anything, I want lots of texture, so random brush strokes is best. Once this is completely dry, we can move to the next step. This is all I had. I'm at home in isolation. I had to use crazy glue. No problem. Let's give it a try. I am really going on a whim. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but it says it's crazy and it's glue, so let's see if it's up to its name. So yes, the glue is crazy. It actually worked. So I'm going to flip this upright, and I'm actually going to paint the inside because we don't want to expose that it's actually glass, because we want a nice stone effect. And then we can move to our next step. So once it was completely dry, I am now just going to go and throw a second coat of the super thick, kind of dried out a little bit chalk paint. And now I want to apply the lacquer. So this is a matte finish lacquer, and it's great because it doesn't leave a sheen on it, because I want that nice flat finish. So I'm going to paint the whole thing and let it dry, and I'm always really happy with this lacquer because it dries super fast. The next step will be dark wax, and because we've used the lacquer, it's actually a bit of a barrier, so we can definitely pull this back a little bit, so it's just going to look like I'm applying mud everywhere, but this is going to give it a nice aged, worn, and if not a little bit of a stone effect. So let's just apply it everywhere. And I love using steel wool as a means of sanding and pulling the dark wax off, and as you will see why. It doesn't actually leave scratch marks, which is beautiful. It pulls the wax back and it leaves all of that dark wax into the lower points of the paint. As you can see, I'm just using a dark wax brush here, but you could also use a cloth as well. You really want to get right into those little tiny details, especially with this air-dry clay mold that we created. And this is actually a great example of something in the future I plan to show you here on my channel, is a color distress with varnish. Varnish actually leaves great texture, and when you're doubling up and blending with your colors, you can make some beautiful, beautiful nostalgic looks. Even that gorgeous Gustavian look. I am super delighted with how this has turned out. I love it. And again, everybody has those glasswares and old dishware things that you have laying around your house. So if you want to create a new look, this is a fast, easy, simple way to do so. I had gotten so caught up in getting it finished that I forgot to push play, but I did put some more French linen on this. And because we have the Pearlescent Glaze, that particular glaze is actually a sealer as well, and there is a purpose to why I did it in the steps I did. So right now I am putting dark wax on everything I can. So I'm getting it into all the little crevices, and I even found an old toothbrush unused, and I am going to use that to get right into those little tiny areas I can't get my wax brush in. And you're going to see what we'll do next. So exactly like the glass pot that we just completed, I am actually taking steel wool. And because we have that Pearlescent Glaze, which is actually a sealer as well, I am pulling back those extra layers and bringing in that pearl again. And this multi-layered look is turning out, so I'm pretty happy with this experiment. You can put as much dark wax or take back as much dark wax as you want. It all depends on the exact look that you prefer to go with. I want the pearl to come through. So this particular point, you can make it as shimmery as you want, or you can dull it as much as you'd like. So definitely a lot of control here, and I am absolutely loving this look. So it's almost like Pearlescent Glaze distress with a bit of color using the steel wool. I had some glass vases from flowers that I've received in the past, and with Lewis blue, and I'm also going to use some duck egg blue by Annie Sloan, and we're going to paint these and see how shimmery with the color we can make it. Because we're going to use the Pearlescent Glaze, it was noted that the brush stroke marks will be accentuated due to the light reflective qualities of the glaze. So I want to paint this as smooth as possible, so I'm just doing a brush stroke up and down. I am not doing side to side. So I'm going to go ahead and put this Lewis blue, or as some people like to say, it's called Louis blue. But then, is it garage or is it garage? Anyhow, going on, nice simple long strokes. Want to make it nice and smooth because again, we're just going to apply the Pearlescent Glaze directly on top of this. I do recommend painting with 2 coats when you paint glass or metal or plastic. And also, because as I mentioned, these are for flowers, if I wanted to use them as for flowers again, I don't want to paint the entire inside. So I'm just going to paint maybe 2-3 inches into it. So you can't tell it's glass, but you can still place water safely at the bottom. So for continuity, I generally like to paint the bottoms, so I just flip these upside down to let them dry and paint the bottoms. So let's go ahead and put the Pearlescent Glaze on. Since I've started using this product, I do recommend for every time you use it, because it is water-based, is to give it a good stir. And we'll go ahead and apply the glaze here with a small artist's brush and going in the same direction as I did with the paint. And again, because I'm trying to eliminate the brush strokes, because the pearl essence will highlight the brush strokes, and I'd like it as smooth as we can. So I'm going to go ahead and put it on both, and then we can go ahead and check it out and see how it looks in the sunshine. So when applying the Pearlescent Glaze over light colors, I recommend 2 solid coats, and it best ensures the effect as well as the protection without the need of wax or lacquer. I'm now going to go ahead and put the chandelier flame tip light bulbs in, and stay tuned for next Saturday's tutorial on custom stenciling and shading. I want to show you how you can stencil bathroom floor tiles, staircase risers, fireplace, and outdoor deck.